The BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the programme and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Anne Scott James, Denis Norden, Dilys, Powell, and Frank Muir. And round one tries to test their vocabulary. We begin with Anne Scott James. Anne, what's the meaning of Cedilla or Cedilla?
Oh, Jack, vous êtes un beau garçon. In French and similar languages, a C sounds soft naturally in front of E or I.
Yes.
But if you want to make it soft in front of A, O, or O, you have to put a twiggly thing like a collar upside down with its hair standing on end under the C.
Well done. Absolutely right. 2 marks. It's a Spanish and partly Italian word, and it really means a little Z. But it looks, as Anne quite rightly says, like a comma upside down. And it means the C is pronounced softly and not like K. Frank Muir, what's meant by bumpologist or bumposopher?
Is it ologist in the sense of study of?
Yes.
Science of? Mm. Science of bumps?
Well.
What?
Well.
Are you offering me my choice? No, it can't. You mean it's a judge of the Miss World contest?
Definitely bumps in the wrong place.
It's not a phrenologist.
Yes.
That lovely Victorian thing that you tell a person's character things by the bumps on their heads.
Absolutely right. 2 marks it is. These are humorous terms for a phrenologist, the chap who attempts to tell your character and your capabilities by examining the protuberances on your skull, if any. To this power, what does cerecloth mean? C-E-R-E-C-L-O-T-H. Cerecloth.
I have a feeling that's rather a melancholy term.
It is?
Well, I think it's a cloth that I hate to mention this in such cheerful company, you wrap the body up in.
Absolutely dead right, 2 marks. It was used mainly for grave clothes, but it is cloth impregnated with wax and used as what used to be called a winding sheet. You could wear it as a Macintosh, though I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Anyway, it's Denis Norden's question now. What does Chryselephantine mean?
Well, it's a kind of mausoleum. Chris, if I mistake me not, is gold.
Yes.
It's a Greek thing meaning gold.
Yep.
Elephantine means
Ivory.
elephantine.
Ivory.
Oh, that could be it, yes. It's ivory and gold used for the decoration of coffins.
Chryselephantine statue of Zeus was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Thank you very much, Anne. That's just what I wanted.
Now, we just get an extra mark.
They ought to. We'll get your 2.
Sounds more like Greek false teeth.
Well, in a sense it was.
A bridge.
Because it was elephant ivory and elephant's teeth. Golden ivory, and they used to decorate their statues with it, and as Anne quite rightly says. Well, before we begin the second round, I read out a quotation for each team to write down, and I want the 2 women team members to study them, because at the end of the programme I shall ask them where the quotations come from. So, Anne Scott James and Denis, your quotation is, "Oh, the little more, and how much it is." And Dilys, Powell and Frank, yours is, "When the hounds of spring are on winter's traces." And then in the last round of the programme, I shall ask Denis and Frank to give me their idea of how these came to be said or written. Next round is about the author of the week. I want you to identify the author first, and then I shall ask some further questions about author and works. 2 marks are correct answers. Here's a quotation to help. "That celebrated, cultivated, underrated nobleman, the Duke of Plaza-Toro." Now, Anne Scott James, who is the author? And from which of his works does the quotation come?
Now, the author is W.S. Gilbert.
Yes.
And it comes from...
And the opera?
Let's try the gondoliers.
Yes, you're quite right. Well done. 2 marks. Sir William Schwenk Gilbert, the other half of Sullivan, and it's a chorus from a song in Act 1 of the Gondoliers. Now, Frank Muir. Oh, I am a cook and a captain bold, and the mate of the Nancy brig, and a boatswain tight, and a midshipmite, and the crew of the captain's gig.
What's the question?
In which of Gilbert's works will you find this? And why was the speaker all those characters put together?
This is this lyric, isn't it?
Yes.
Which goes on, and the figurehead was a girl in bed.
No, not quite.
I can't read your writing. Bab.
Yes.
Oh, Bab Ballads.
Bab Ballads, that's the first one.
Bab
Right.
Ballads.
Can you remember why he was all those things at once?
He what? Anthropomorph.
He ate the lot.
He ate everybody.
You're there between you. 2 marks. The Bab Ballads, which is a collection of humorous and satirical verses, and this is the yarn of the Nancy Bell, and the chap who's speaking was identified with all these characters because he'd eaten the lot, cook and mate and midshipmite and all, after shipwreck. 2 marks. Denis Powell, my object all sublime, I shall achieve in time. What was the object? Who sang about it? And in which opera?
Mikado. It's a Mikado.
Yes. But what was he trying to do?
To make the punishment fit the crime.
That's what I
Punishment
wanted.
fit the crime and make it unwillingly represent a source of innocent merriment, of innocent merriment. The notes were
I hope you're in good voice, Dennis, because it's coming our way.
As Rupert Dolicart turns in his grave, but you get your 2 marks. Denis Norden. When the coster's finished jumping on his mother, he loves to lie basking in the sun. Which is the opera, and what's the moral of this particular song?
Nothing.
Oh, this is when an enterprising burglar's not a burglar.
That's right.
Yeah. It's when constabulary duties to be done. I'm not. It's too
We
easy.
can sing
yes,
too.
It's too. It's like mentioning Nelson when you're doing a concert at Portsmouth. It's the most easy way to work in. Now,
It's a cheap laugh.
a policeman's lot, actually, in contemporary terms, a policeman's lot is not a hippie one.
Hippie one.
This'll do, except you haven't mentioned the actual opera.
The opera was The Pirates of Penzance.
Yes, all right. 2 marks it is, well done. And it was the constabulary, very much afraid of pirates, who went on singing that a policeman's lot is not a happy one. 2 marks. The next round tries to find the odd man out, and what I do is to give 4 book titles, or titles of poems or plays, of which 3 were written by the same author, and 1 wasn't. I want to know which is the odd one, and who the authors are, and again for 2 marks. Anne Scott James, The Pet Lamb, The Solitary Reaper, The Deserted Village, The River Duddon.
I don't know, Goldsmith's in there somewhere.
And what's the last one?
The River Duddon.
I've only heard of the Deserted Village.
Goldsmith
If
is
you
in there
must,
with
though.
a chance.
Yeah.
Try that.
I think we count the Pet Lamb's the odd man out.
Oh, I don't think
Are they minor poems of Wordsworth, the others?
Yes.
They are. So
So the Deserted Village the odd
is
man out. Oh, brilliant.
Bye.
Goldsmith.
By Goldsmith.
Yes, I think you get that. 2 marks. Frank Muir, Look Back in Anger, Goodbye to All That, Inadmissible Evidence, The Entertainer.
Goodbye to All That, which is a book. The others are plays.
Authors?
Well, the plays are written by John Osborne.
Yes.
And the book was an autobiographical book, which caused a tremendous stir when it came out because it rather blew the gaff on the First World War and Robert Graves' public school.
That's right. 2 marks, an absolutely accurate answer. Dilys Powell, Tiger in the Smoke, The 5 Red Herrings, The 9 Tailors, Murder Must Advertise.
Murder Must Advertise, and the 9
Tailors.
Tailors is Dorothy Sayers.
Tiger in the Smoke, The 5
Tiger in
Red...
the Smoke is the one out.
Bye.
Marjorie Allingham. Marjorie Allingham.
Between you, we've got there. Tiger in the Smoke is one of the best of Marjorie Allingham's detective novels, and the others are all detective novels by Dorothy Sayers. Denis Norden, I, Robot, Rossum's Universal Robots, or R-U-R, Pebble in the Sky, Little Lost Robot.
Well, I, Robot, Pebble in the Sky, Little Lost Robot by Isaac Asimov, and RURs by Carol Chapek.
Well done. 2 marks. Rossum's Universal Robots, RUR, the Czech writer Karol Čapek, in fact, I think invented the term robot, which doesn't occur in literature before. And then, of course, it was taken up by lots of other people, and more particularly by Isaac Asimov, who has written series after series with robots in them. Well, now comes the round of initials and abbreviations. For 2 marks, I want to know what they stand for. Anne Scott James, CR. Big C, little r, no dots.
Is it what they put on your bank account?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, credit.
All right, 2 marks. It's creditor. I suppose if your bank was lazy, it could stand for the black bits in your current account or credit. Frank Muir, small letters, J-N.
Julia.
No. Come in sort of commuting from South London. You pass...
Jamming.
No.
Commuting from South London.
Yeah. No, outside.
You pass... wait a minute, you pass Wimbledon.
Junction.
That's what I wanted.
Junction.
Junction it is. 1.5, a pretty strong hint, like Clapham Junction. Dilys Powell, N-P. Small letters, dots between them. N-P.
Not possible.
NP, no postscript.
No.
Oh, NP.
New
paragraph.
That'll do. Well, now Denis Norden. Sp-gr. S-P and a dot, G-R and a dot, all small letters.
Spoonful of gravy.
Radiogram.
Specific gravity.
That's it. That's what I wanted. Well done. Oh, well, now we come to the last round and go back to the quotations I gave the 2 teams earlier in the programme. For 2 marks, Anne Scott James, can you give me the origin of your quotation? Oh, the little more and how much it is.
It's from a poet.
Yes, it's a poet.
That's good.
Had a wife.
Oh, he had a wife. Did he run away with her?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's Robert Browning.
All right. It's Robert Browning's poem, By the Fireside. Well, now, Dilys Powell, the origin of your quotation, please. When the hounds of spring are on winter's traces.
It's by Swinburne.
Yep. Do you remember the poem?
She was Atalanta and Calzone.
No, absolutely did, right. You get 2 marks. Out. Well, now I shall ask Denis and Frank to give me their peculiar explanations of how these quotations came into being. And for this round only, the marks will go to whichever improbable story gets the longer applause from the audience here in the theatre. So back to Denis Norden and Oh, the Little More and How Much It Is.
Some time ago, Frank and I wrote a television series that turned out such a dismal failure that the Times reviewed it in the obituary column. But the review that really hurt was the one that said, the trouble with Muir and Norden is that they've done so many chat programs, they're not writers at all anymore. They're just talkers. Well, Frank brooded about that all day. Suppose it's true, he said. You know what it means? It means my name will never go down to posterity. He's got a big thing about posterity, Frank. He wants to be there when it happens. When I go, he said to me, I want to be remembered. Well, I'll remember you. Big fellow with a moustache. Swiped my ballpoint pen. That's not satisfying enough, Frank said. When you describe somebody as just talkers, how many talkers get remembered by posterity? Yes, Dr. Johnson, perhaps. But he had Boswell. Boswell followed Dr. Johnson about everywhere with a notebook. Well, now, he says, why can't we do that? Well, I said, I think he's dead. We could ring up the British Medical Association and ask if they got a Dr. Johnson still practice. He said, no. You don't get it, he said. What about Norden's Life of Muir? Done in exactly the same way. What about that? When do we start? Well, said Frank, can you give me one reason why we can't start this very minute? Yes, I said, I can. He said, what? I said, I haven't got a notebook. Sir, said Frank, you could tell he was already sort of living it, you see. You will need more than one notebook. 5 volumes at, say, 300 pages per volume. He did a little rapid calculation. You will need 870 notebooks. Well, we were round to that office stationer's in Maddox Street within about 5 minutes. Frank asked for the manager. Sir, he said, not only living it now, but loving it. Sir, he said, I am Frank Muir, and this, indicating me, is my biographer. How do, said the manager. A little nervously, I thought. He said, what can I do for you? I said, do you stock those threepenny notebooks with a spiraled wire going down the spine? Certainly, the manager said, yes, I'll get you one. Sir, said Frank, 870. Well, we had to hang about a bit while they sent for reinforcements from the main warehouse at Ladbroke Grove. But they were kind enough to stack all the notebooks into one of those big wooden packing crates. So we sauntered back along Regent Street. Well, he sauntered. I tottered a bit. And so agreeable and clement was the autumnal sunshine that Frank was moved to make an observation. Sir, he observed, the new cars always come out in the autumn. That is why they are called automobiles. Unfortunately, the blood was pounding so hard in my ears, I didn't actually hear him. Do what? I said. He said, write it down. I said, okay. And he repeated it yet again, and I slowly wrote it down in the notebook. Now, it was while I was writing it down, this old lady tugged at my sleeve. Excuse me, Constable, she said. What are you charging this man with? Now, it must have been while I was explaining to her that I wasn't a policeman and I was a biographer who was just starting on the first page of a 5-volume biography. It must have been I was doing that somebody swiped the packing case. So that is why the publication of the much heralded Norden's Life of Muir will now be a little delayed. All I have of it so far is just one single Muir observation and a bill for £26.10, being 870 notebooks at 3 each. So you can understand how I'm in sympathy with Browning's remark, oh, what little Muir, and oh, how much it is.
Well, I very much hope it won't be too long delayed. We shall all be waiting for this. Well, now we go back to Frank Muir himself, and if you remember, his quotation was, when the hounds of spring are on winter's traces.
The other day, a man said to me, may I have a word with you? And I said, "Sir, a whole dictionary." It was my biographer, Norden, who was asking. And he said, "You haven't given me anything to write, and I've got all these notebooks. Hasn't anything interesting happened?" And I said, "Well, no, not much interesting has happened, Norden, but something interesting is soon going to happen. My Afghan hound is soon going to be financially independent." Now, I expected him to be taken aback by this, but he wasn't taken aback, which is an affront. Then I realised that Norden is not a doggy chap. And if you talk about animals to Norden, good biographer though he may be, it goes in one ear and out the other, like water down a duck's back. One day, my wife said to me, "We were hoping to keep it a secret. The dogs wanted me to keep it a secret from you, but Casa is going to have puppies." I said, my hound going to have puppies?" She said, "Yes." And my eyes were bright. She said, "Oh, come on, I don't like to see a man crying." But I said, the food, she'll be eating for 4. She said, "They normally have 8. The food bill's already like a wedding reception bill every month. 8 pup." She said, "Yes." And then last week I was in Manchester recording a show, and I ran into a comedian. Do you know the comedians Mike and Bernie Winter? Well, it was Bernie Winter. He was the slightly stouter one who wears his teeth in a fringe. And I ran into Bernie. He was also up there, and we had a few hours to spare, and we were just outside one of those self-help cafes, you know, which have notices all over the place. Do not leave without paying. Do not leave your cups on the table if they're dirty. Do not take too much sugar. So I said to Bernie, let's go into the cafe and have a cup of coffee and a do not. And we went... I think it always helps, you know, when you're talking to a comedian to lighten his load. And we went in. I said, he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I've got a few hours spare. I'm just wandering around." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm going around antique shops and places because I'm a bit of a collector on the side." So I said, "What do you collect?" And he said, "Braces." I said, "What?" He said, "Well, I use them in the act. You know, when I put my thumbs in and sort of pull them out and a certain part of the act." He said, "And I collect very sort of unusual ones because I can use them in the act." So I said, "What have you got?" He said, "I've got the red ones with the hunt going across them." And I said, "Have you got dogs?" So he said, "Yes." He said, "I've got the usual, you know, the Pekingese, the faces of the Pekingese." And suddenly, in an illuminating flash, I said, "Bernie, how would this grab you? How about a pair of braces with the portraits of 8 puppies on, 4 per brace, embroidered with hairs which have fallen off the puppies themselves?" He said, "I don't care how much money I pay. Money's no object." I said, "It is to me." I said, I quite agree. I said, "Right." He said, "When can I have it?" I said, "You can have it in a month or two's time." He said, "Fine." We shook hands. And that's why I said to my biographer, Norden, I said, "The best thing that's happened to me is very soon," I said, "my Afghan will be financially independent, will make me financially independent." And he said, "Well, when will that be? When?" I said, "When? I'll tell you, sir. Sir, when the hound's offspring are on winter's braces."
Well, by your vote, ladies and gentlemen, Denis Norden wins the contest of the 2 stories, and he and his partner, Anne Scott James, also win the entire contest. And that brings to an end this edition of My Word.
In My Word, you heard Dilys Powell, Anne Scott James, Frank Muir and Denis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland, who also compiled the questions. The programme was devised by Tony Schreien and Edward J. Mason and presented by the BBC. BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the programme and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Anne Scott James, Denis Norden, Dilys Powell, and Frank Muir. Here's round one to test their respective vocabularies. 2 marks if they get the right answers. We begin with Dilys Powell. Dilys, what does auscultation mean? A-U-S-C-U-L-T-A-T-I-O-N, auscultation.
Well, it's kind of medical listening.
And how do you do that?
I think with a stethoscope, probably. Don't you?
Yeah, oh, absolutely right if you can afford one. You can do it by ear, but...
Can you?
Yes.
Oh, you place the ear to the chest of the patient.
Right. But often with a stethoscope.
It's very matey.
2 marks. It means listening with ear or stethoscope to all the noises inside, and there are many of them, heart and lungs and so on. Latin word.
When you place your ear against the patient's chest, you must make sure you're still attached to it.
All right, 2 marks. Denis Norden, what's the meaning of sabulous?
Sabulous. I don't know if you remember that film Sabu, the Elephant Boy.
Yes.
But if the elephant had gone under a low bridge...
If you think on what the elephant at that moment was treading, if it's that part of India that I'm
Something
thinking
to do with
about.
sand, is
Sand,
it?
yes.
So
Sable.
sabulous means what then?
It's to do with sand.
Yes.
Sand-like.
Sandy.
Yes, made of sand or sandy, and it comes from a Latin word meaning sabulum, sand. Anne Scott James, what is an écru or écru?
Well, it's a kind of lace. Well, it's a colour.
Yes, the colour is what I want.
I think it comes from the lace. It's a very, very pale beige colour.
Why? Why isn't it white?
Why isn't it white?
I should think because it's raw. It hasn't been dyed. It
That's
hasn't been
right.
bleached, I should think.
Right, 2 marks it is. It's a French word meaning raw or unbleached. Frank Muir, what would you do with metheglin? Metheglin. Metheglin.
Don't touch it. It's a combination of methylated spirits and gin. Which they used to make in the olden days and call mead. It's a variety of mead.
Well, would you leave out the meth in the sort of technical sense?
No, it's alcoholic.
Yes, all right, that's right. But not necessarily made with methylated spirits. That's all I wanted.
It's herbal, actually. It's herbal mead as distinct from
Absolutely right.
unherbal.
Absolutely right. It's a spiced kind of mead, which used, I don't know if it is now, used to be drunk a good deal by the Welsh, meaning healing liquor. Sounds really good. And before we begin the next round, I'm going to read out a quotation for each team to write down, and the 2 women members will do well to study those quotations, because at the end of the programme I shall ask them where they come from. Dilys Powell and Frank Muir, your quotation is, remember that time is money. And Anne Scott James and Denis, yours, for the labourer is worthy of his hire. And then in the last round I shall ask Frank and Denis to give me their ideas of how these came to be said or written. Well, now comes a quickie round of initials and abbreviations, and these come all in small letters. 2 marks. Dilys Powell, fur. Fur.
Fur?
F-U-R with a dot.
Furlong.
Yes. Furlong or 220 yards. 2 marks. Denis Norden, N-S. Both small, but dots between them. N-S.
Nova Scotia, no.
That's big S.
No sail.
No, I think that's big letters too.
N-S.
Is it Latin?
No. When you were very young and first had a bank account, it might have happened to you if you were unlucky.
Not a sausage.
I'll give you 1 out of 2 for that. It stands for not sufficient. That is, not sufficient funds to meet that cheque that you rather misguidedly signed. Anne Scott James now. OP. O-P, small letters, dot at the end. OP.
It means opus or work.
Yes, OP, it stands for opus, Latin word, work. Frank Muir. Trs. T-R-S with a dot at the end.
It's a transfer, or what's it?
Transcribe.
Not quite, neither of those, nearly.
It's when you
Translate.
want to put a one line in the other,
That's right.
above the other.
Transmute.
Transfer.
You've nearly got it. You said very nearly got it.
Trans-Siberian Railway.
It is when you want to move the letter, move the line round.
1.5. It's transpose. It means
That's a good idea, yes.
when you're proofreading a book or an article, and you put this sign in the margin of the proof, it means that the letters or the words have got the wrong way round. You want to get them the right way round. Transpose.
Well, let's remember that.
1.5. We now come to the odd man out. And each question comes in lots of 4, and they're either book titles or some other things. 3 of these belong together, and 1 doesn't. What I want to know is which is the odd one, and then to have the other 3 identified as well. 2 marks again. Dilys Powell, 10 Little Niggers, The 7 Dials Mystery, 5 Little Pigs, The 4 Just Men.
The 4 Just Men is by Edgar Wallace, and the other 3 are Agatha Christie.
2 marks. Denis Norden, The Golden Apples of the Sun, The Kraken Wakes, Fahrenheit 451, The Illustrated Man.
Well, the Kraken Wakes is the odd man out.
Yes.
That's by the chap who wrote Day of the Triffids, John Wyndham.
Yes. And the other 3?
The other 3 are Ray Bradbury.
Well done, 2 marks. Anne Scott James, When We Were Very Young, Pigling Bland, Winnie the Pooh, Now We Are 6.
Oh, it's the first time I've ever been able to do it. Pickling Bland is by Beatrix Potter.
Yes.
And the other three are by A.A. Milne.
Absolutely right. 2 marks. Frank Muir, Coton, Aubryon, Richebourg, Chambertin.
Aubryon, free of wine, and Aubryon's an Irishman. Aubryon?
It was originally.
Coton Aubryon.
Coton, Aubryon, Richebourg, Chambertin.
Chambertin. They're all red wines.
Yes.
They're all red wines, and one of them must be a... Oh, Richebourg
I can't
is a
spell
Burgundy.
Richebourg.
Richebourg is a Burgundy.
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 Yes. Chambertin, Coton.
Chambertin. And
Well,
Coton,
not.
a Burgundy.
I helped a bit.
That's
And
right, Burgundy.
Aubryon.
And Aubryon is a claret.
What was the question?
I think 1.5 again. These
We did well.
We did all right,
You did
I think.
did pretty well with help. Wine, not books this time. Aubryon is one of the great clarets, first celebrated in Samuel Pepys, and the others are all Burgundies. Now 4 doggy questions. 2 marks again. Yes, wait. Dilys Powell, what are dog days and why were they so called?
Dog days are rather hot days in about August.
Yes, and why were they so called?
They're called something to do with Sirius, who was somebody's dog in the sky.
Yes, but
Is it Orestes? No, Orion.
that's right, yes. But
Around.
why does it become hot? Why did they think it became hot?
Well, Sirius used to look rather red in the sky.
These are days of great heat, and the Romans called the 6 or 8 hottest weeks in the year caniculares dies, or dog days, because Sirius, the dog star, rose with the sun at that time of the year, and so supposedly added to the heat of the days. Denis Norden, what is dog's nose, and what would you do with it?
It's too much to suppose that it's the nose of a dog.
Altogether too much.
Yeah.
Drink it?
Yes.
Because we know what they do.
Yes.
You drink it.
You drink it, yes. Now, you want to know what it's made up of?
Yes, we've had half of it already by accident.
Gin.
Yes, that's one. And
Gin and anything.
You add...
Gin and furniture polish. I think comes out all
dash
black and
lime, a little
shiny.
soup, some of bitters. Then you
Yes.
shake it all up with some whiskey.
not bit-
And don't stir.
You've
yeah.
got it in the plural instead of the singular. You said what first?
Oh, bitter.
Yes.
Beer. Gin and beer.
Gin and beer? What a horrible combination.
Frightful. Absolutely frightful.
I hoped you'd think that. 1.5. It's a mixture of gin and beer, and it's mentioned in Pickwick Papers, among other things, and I suppose if you were brave enough, you would, in fact, drink it.
Not me.
Anne Scott James, what is dog Latin, and how did it come to be so called?
Well, it means very bad, jokey Latin, which isn't grammatical at all.
Quite. And why called dog?
Well, it must be something to do with a Latin word.
No.
Canis, is it?
No.
Oh.
It's really quite simple. Unless you have a very...
Oh, because dogs don't talk Latin very well.
No, it's...
They really don't. My
unless you have-
little dog, who's
Well, is
slightly smaller than that appalling Afghan hound.
Is it
really
pedigree? Your dog?
Yes, I'm really not going to
Mongrel
talk
Latin.
about mongrel Latin.
That's right.
But this is what we mean, I suppose.
Yes. All right. 1.5 again.
But it's rather silly, isn't it, really? Because after all, dog doesn't mean a mongrel necessarily.
No,
It could
no,
mean
it's-
an Afghan, a very highly bred Afghan
It's a
hound.
frightful insult on the noble animal.
Yes.
But a good example comes in Stevens's description of a kitchen, which I think you'll like, Anne. A kitchen is camera necessaria pro usus cucare, cum saucepani, stewpani, scullero, dressero, coal-holo, stovis, smoke jacko, pro roastandum, bollandum, friandum, et plum pudding mixandum.
Excellent.
Somebody we once did a thing about being asked the Latin for pin-up girl, and he said it was Virgo tintacta.
Dennis, that's even better than my example. Thank you. Frank Muir, what does to blush like a black dog mean?
Well, if it was to blush like a red dog,
Well, that's
it would
enough.
mean nothing would happen.
Well, that's good enough. It'll do.
But not very visibly, but it can be blushing visibly.
You've given the answer. It means you're incapable of blushing at all. First of all, because dogs don't blush, at least not noticeably so. And if they did, you'd be least likely to notice the process if the dog was black or, as Frank suggested, red. 2 marks. Well, now we come to the last round. And so we go back to those quotations I gave the 2 teams earlier in the program. For 2 marks, Dilys Powell, can you give me the origin of your quotation? Remember that time is money.
A proverb.
Well, it is a kind of proverb.
An American proverb.
Yes, you're getting very close to it.
An American proverb.
Yes, but it had an originator. 2, in fact.
Time is money. Henry Ford.
No, I should go a bit earlier than that.
Benjamin Franklin. Ha.
Remember that time is money comes in Benjamin Franklin's Advice to a Young Tradesman, but it also comes in the novelist Bulwer Lytton, in a play and in another volume. Just time is money. 1.5. And Scott James, the origin of your quotation, please. For the labourer is worthy of his hire.
Well, it's from the Bible,
Which bit?
the New Testament, one of the Gospels.
Have a shot at the gospel.
Luke.
Quite right, 2 marks. Well, now I'm going to ask Frank and Denis to give me their explanations of how these quotations came into being. And for this round only, the marks will go to whichever improbable story receives the longer applause from the audience here in the theatre. So back to Frank Muir and his quotation, remember that time is money.
Yes, my lad. I have something to say before you pass sentence. I'm not going to ask you to mitigate the severe sentence you will no doubt pronounce when I've finished. But I just want to stop other people making the mistakes that I made and landing up in my sorry plight in this dock at the moment. I was guilty, my lord, as the jury found. I did expose myself in Bond Street on the evening of the 15th, being found without my trousers by the police constable, and I did also steal 1 carrier bag, value 2p. The reason for this, my lord, was, and herein lies a lesson to men, that my wife and I decided to slim, because I'd calculated if we lost a stone of weight each, we wouldn't need to have our shoes repaired quite as frequently. So for a very laudable object, my lord, of saving money, we slimmed. I saw the result of the slimming. It was brought home very forcibly on that Wednesday evening in question, when I stepped out of a taxi that evening in Bond Street, paid the driver with a £1 note, and he gave me 80p in silver. I put it in my trouser pocket and my trousers fell down. The reason the trousers fell down, my lord, was, of course, I hadn't got the tummy I had. The waistband was no longer stretched. I put the silver in, down came the trousers. My next mistake, my lord, was really stepping out of the trousers. I should have quickly pulled them up. But stepping out of them, I was so shocked or something, and not noticing the Alsatian dog. And then when I turned around and saw it running up the road with the trousers in its jaws, "Stop!" I shouted. But it had gone. Well, there was I, stuck in Bond Street without any trousers. I didn't panic, my lord. I did my best not to give an offence. I took my jacket off. I ripped the sleeves off. And I put the sleeves onto my legs. They only came down halfway to the thigh, but they were a form of covering. Unhappily, my lord, they missed out, as it were, the crutch of the matter. I had, as it were, trousers without the pair. The hinge part of me, if you see, my lord, I wasn't entirely naked, my lord. And then I saw this old lady coming towards me, and I ran to this building site where they were repairing that big building at the back of Bond Street. There's a whole lot of bricks and things, and picked up a bucket and held it in front of me. And the lady came right up to me and she said, "I know what you're thinking." And I said, "What?" She said, "You're thinking there's a bottom to that bucket, aren't you?" So that was no use, and it was then, my lord, that I stole the paper bag, the carrier bag. It was full of empty milk bottles outside a flat. And I took out the empty milk bottles, and I tore a 4-inch strip off the bottom at one corner, and I tore a 4-inch strip off the bottom of the other, and it made a pair of rather bloomer-like trousers, my lord. I climbed into those, pulling them up tight with the handles. I was waiting for a 38 bus in Piccadilly when P.C. Burke arrested me. I would like to compliment P.C. Burke on the fair way he gave his evidence. He acted thoroughly and properly throughout, my lord. And I want to say now that unless you warn people, unless you give me the maximum sentence and warn other people, they too, slimmers, people who take a stone weight off, they too are going to expose themselves in fast lifts going up, let alone receiving heavy change. So, do warn them. What I would say, my lord, is I would have a sentence carved on every slimmer's wardrobe just to remind them that now they've no longer got a vast stomach, their trousers are going to descend. I would just write a nice phrase that they'll all remember. I should put, remember that tummy's mini.
Well, it'd give me great pleasure to buy Frank a pair of braces tomorrow. And we go on to Denis Norden, and if you remember, his quotation was, "For the labourer is worthy of his hire."
I've often thought that some sociologists should write a thesis or treatise or treatise or thesis or should do a job of research on the things people write in the margins of books they take out of public libraries. As a clumsy title, perhaps, but it's a fascinating subject. Some of the things they write in library books you can, of course, understand immediately. The shopping lists in books of art criticism. Small wholemeal loaf, half-dozen eggs, 2 straw yogs. You can even work out that long list of apparently disconnected figures that are always scribbled on the fly leaves of Harold Robbins' books. They just give you the page numbers of the pages that have got the dirty bits. They do save quite a lot of time, actually. You can even, for that matter, conjure up a sort of mental photograph of some of the people who write some of the things. The sweet old ladies who write, "How true," right next to the emotional passages in Barbara Cartland novels. Or the mean-faced little men who write at the top of the first page of a detective story, "The chauffeur did it." Although, mind you, the world being what it is, it could well be the mean-faced men who write "How true" in Barbara Cartland novels, and sweet old ladies who put "The chauffeur did it" and detective story. But the thing that really defies logic, the thing that really sets the mind spinning with these marginal notations, are the exclamation marks. Why are the exclamation marks that people write in library books, why are they always next to the most innocuous and neutral-seeming passages? Do you know what I mean? I was reading a book quite recently by Denis Norden, and I was going along very happily, and I came to the line, "He got off the train at Godalming Station." Do you know what I found? Someone had not only heavily underlined that, he'd placed 3 exclamation marks beside. He'd scored them into the paper so deeply you could imagine him holding the pen in his fist with his teeth bared. Now, why? He got off the train at Godalming Station. Did it mean that reader, some reader before me, had once got off a train at Godalming Station, not realizing he was on an express train? Or was it that this book had once been taken out by the Godalming Station master, who was doing a bit of PRO work there? Could it be that there isn't a station at Godalming? Now, it is true that in any case, a public library is a sort of treasure house for anybody who speculates in human frailty of any kind. I once in the Swiss Cottage public library, I saw a man returning a book called Little Known Poisons, and he was wearing a black armband. Such incidents do raise intriguing conjectures, but none so intriguing as the mystery of these exclamation marks. Could Godalming Station be the centre of an international call girl ring, so that the phrase "he got off" at Godalming? I would suggest again that if there is a sociologist willing to look into this matter, it would amply repay the Association of Public Libraries to hire a special office for him. I'm sure he would find it fascinating. Or as St. Luke once observed, the library is worth the office hire. Exclamation.
Well, by your vote, ladies and gentlemen, Denis Norden wins the story contest, and in fact, he and Anne Scott James also win the entire contest, and that brings to an end this edition of My Word.
In My Word, you heard Dilys Powell, Anne Scott James, Frank Muir and Denis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland, who also compiled the questions. The programme was devised by Tony Schreien and Edward J. Mason and presented by the BBC. BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the programme and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Anne Scott James, Denis Norden, Dilys Powell, and Frank Muir. Round one tries to test their respective vocabularies, and for 2 marks, I want to know the meaning of the following words. We begin with Dilys Powell. Dilys, what does fuliginous mean?
Fuliginous? Something to do with the city, I think, isn't it? I mean...
Yes, it could be. Well, not nowadays, perhaps, but...
No?
No, it's smokeless fuel now.
Smokeless? No smoke. No smoke. Well, then it's something to do with soot. Sooty.
Good enough. 2 marks. Absolutely right. It means sooty or soot-coloured, Latin word meaning soot. 2 marks. Denis Norden, what does the word chaparral bring into your mind? C-H-A-P-A-R-R-A-L.
It brings into my mind the thought that it's generally pronounced chaparral. It's some kind of Western or cowboy geographical term. I never quite known what it means, but they say, you mosey on up the chaparral and I'll head 'em off at the gulch.
Well, gulch we know about. Try chaparral.
I don't know, it's high.
Yes, it can be. I'll give you 2 marks if you tell me where you would normally find it.
Way out west somewhere.
Will do.
Yeah.
2 marks. It is originally a thicket of dwarf evergreen oak, and so very dense, tangled brushwood and wood, mainly in Texas and Mexico, and the film was The High Chaparral. It comes from a Spanish word meaning just that, the evergreen oak. 2 marks. Anne Scott James, what is an affiche? A-F-F-I-C-H-E, affiche.
It means a notice, doesn't it?
What kind of notice?
Something you stick up.
Stick.
On?
A bill. Hoarding.
2 marks. It's a notice paper or poster fixed to a wall, from French word afficher, meaning to post up, and I suppose a chap who does it, a bill poster, would be an afficheur. 2 marks. Frank Muir, how frightened do you get when you hear the word eldritch? And what does it mean?
It means a literary term, a phrase or fable-like term for a nasty, sinister cry, an eldritch cry.
Yes.
Generally speaking, it's rather strange,
yes, it's
weird.
a supernatural
That's
cry.
what I wanted.
Yeah.
You've got exactly what I wanted. Eldritch is a Scottish word, probably connected with elf, and means weird, unnatural, hideous. You creep home. 2 marks. Well, before we start the next round, I'm going to read a quotation for each team to write down, and then I hope the 2 women members will go on studying them, because at the end of the programme, I shall ask them where the quotations come from. Dilys Powell and Frank Muir, your quotation is, be good, sweet maid, and let who will be clever. There is another version of this, be good, sweet maid, and let who can be clever, but the one I want is will. And then Anne Scott James and Denis Norden, yours is, now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of the party. And then in the last round, I shall ask Frank and Denis to give me their ideas of how these came to be said or written. Next round's about the author of the week. And please identify the author, and after that I shall ask some other questions about the author, life and works, and 2 marks if right. Here's a quotation to help. I went out to Charing Cross to see Major General Harrison hanged, drawn and quartered, which was done there, he looking as cheerful as any man could do in that condition. Dilys Powell, who wrote this, in what work, how long did he go on writing it, and what stopped him?
I think it was somebody who kept a diary.
Yes, it was.
It was Pepys.
And what stopped him? Do you remember?
We mustn't go into his medical troubles.
That comes later.
All right.
Samuel Pepys said this in his diary for the 13th of October, 1660. He wrote for nearly 10 years, from 1660 to May 1669. He gave up because of his failing eyesight. He was worried that he was going blind. Now, Denis Norden, why was the diary so difficult to read, and where is the original of it kept?
Well, it was difficult because he didn't really want anybody to read it. I think particularly not his wife, because he dallied a lot. And so he wrote it in a kind of it's my kind of shorthand. In other words, it's not shorthand, it's a kind of speed writing or secret code writing.
Yes.
And all the scatological bits he did in a very hilarious mixture of sort of dog Latin and French and things like that.
That's right. Well done. Do you remember where the diary is? No? Where it's kept?
No.
1.5. It's kept in the Pepysian library of his books at Magdalen College, Cambridge, of which college Pepys was a member. And Scott James, whom did Samuel Pepys refer to as poor wretch? And why had he some cause to have a bad conscience about this particular poor wretch?
His wife.
That's right.
Oh.
And why had he...
lady.
Why had he a bad conscience?
Well, because he treated us in a typical husbandly way, I should think. General neglect, etc.
Dennis has already mentioned this.
Oh, well, infidelity.
That's right. That's what I wanted.
Actresses.
2 marks. Pepys was referring to his wife, Elizabeth St. Michel, whom he married when she was only 15, and the bad conscience was because he was very variedly unfaithful to her, as the diary records. Now, Frank Muir, Pepys held several posts during his career. Which was the most important one? What interrupted his tenure of it? And why was he finally deprived of it?
Well, he was a sort of civil servant.
Yes.
Very much a civil servant, really. He was clerk. In a sense, I suppose, his most important one was when he ran the victualling.
Yes.
The victualling office, because he put down a tremendous amount of bribery and corruption which was going on there. And he was stopped from doing that because he was flung in the Tower.
Yes.
But I presume that the historical answer is the secretary or something to the Admiralty.
Well done. He was Secretary of the Admiralty, appointed there in 1672. He went to the Tower on suspicion of being concerned in the Popish plot, was reappointed, but finally dismissed after the Revolution, in which his friend and master, James II, was replaced by William III. 2 marks. We come next to the odd man out. Each question comes in lots of 4. Some are book titles and some aren't. And 3 of these belong together and 1 doesn't. So what I want to know is which is the odd one, and I want to have the other 3 identified as well. 2 marks again. Dilys Powell, Coburn, Buell, Croft, Tailor.
Coburn is a port.
Yes.
Croft is a port.
Yes.
And Tailor is a port.
And Buell?
What?
Buell is a...
How do you spell it?
Madeira.
That's right.
Madeira.
B-U-A-L. Well done.
Madeira.
2 marks. Home and west. Denis Norden, La Belle Dame Sans Merci, The Eve of St. Mark, The Witch of Endor, Lamia.
They're all pubs, and the last one is a cafe. I recognise 2 by Keats
Yes,
there.
me too.
Yes.
There was the Eve of St. Mark's.
Yes.
What was it? What was it? I'm sorry.
La Belle Dame Sans Merci.
Yeah, that's Keats. That's Keats.
And Lamia's Keats.
Lamia's Keats.
All right, you've got the 3. And The Witch of Endor.
Oh, this is in the Bible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember what she did?
No.
She gave an eldritch cry.
I'm going to give you 1.5. The Witch of Endor was the woman who had a familiar spirit who was consulted by Saul and threatened by the Philistines. And she called up Samuel, who prophesied the death of Saul and the destruction of his whole army. It was also the title of a book about escaping from the Turks in the First World War. And the other 3, as Dennis says, are all poems by John Keats. 1.5. And Scott James, Schnitzel, Entrecote, Filet, Rump.
One's a fish.
Well, entrecote, filet, and rump are all kinds of steak. And a schnitzel is a sort of done-up job, isn't it?
Veal.
It's veal.
Schnitzel is veal. What are the other 3?
Beef.
What is... Yeah, that's what I wanted. And don't ask me which bits of the animal they come from. So it's a distinction between veal and beef. 2 marks.
Inside of the animal.
Well, now, Frank Muir. The 2 paths, the 7 lamps of architecture, the 39 steps, the stones of Venice.
the Stones of Venice and the Seven Lamps of Architecture is John Ruskin.
Yes.
And the 39 Steps is certainly John Buchan.
The two paths.
So on the laws of chance, it must be Ruskin.
Yes, all right. 2 marks. 39 Steps is a thriller set just before World War I by John Buchan. The other 3 are erudite essays on architecture and other things by John Ruskin. We come now to a round of initials and abbreviations. Again, 2 marks. Dilys Powell, FAO.
Family all out.
That's nice.
Fry-ups are horrible. It's as similar as dictum.
Half a mark for trying.
I tell you what, it backwards is oath.
It's the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations.
It's Faun.
Denis Norden, IHP, small letters and dots between them. IHP.
Would be Italian hire purchase.
How'd you get
On the niente niente, they call it. I hate porridge. I don't know.
These letters are very small. I'll help you. An alternative might be BHP.
Well, that's brake horsepower.
Well, IHP.
IHP is insufficient horsepower. Describes mine. If you fill the ashtray, it won't go up hills. It's insufficient horsepower, is it? No,
Independent.
No.
1 out of 2. It's indicated horsepower, and it's a way of measuring the size of an internal combustion, or the efficiency of an internal combustion engine. The other one, as Dennis said, was brake horsepower. The horse is somewhere else. Anne Scott James, VIS with a dot at the end, capital V, smalls. VIS.
Visor.
No.
Visual.
No. Debret.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Viscount.
VIS, in appropriate circles, stands for Viscount. Frank Muir, FRL, dot.
Furlong.
No, that's FUR, with a dot.
Ah.
Swiss Miss.
Beg your pardon?
I said a Swiss Miss.
Swiss Miss. Fräulein. Fräulein.
Fräulein it is.
Only in a certain part of Switzerland.
Yes, indeed.
Mademoiselle.
Yeah.
1 out of 2. Well, here comes the last round, and we go back to the 2 quotations I gave the teams earlier in the program. 2 marks, Dilys Powell. I'd like the origin of your quotation. Be good, sweet maid, and let who will be clever.
It's by Kingsley.
Well done. 2 marks it is. I think it goes on, do noble deeds, not dream them all day long. That's right, isn't it? And there's something about brave, sweet song after that. 2 marks. Anne Scott James, I'd like the origin of yours. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of the party.
I don't think it was said at all by anybody. I think it's a copybook phrase. And it's the typewriting.
Yes.
It's a standard thing that typists are taught, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yep. It's a phrase used in secretarial colleges as a typing exercise. The origin appears to be pretty obscure, but there was an American poet called E.M. Robinson who wrote a poem, The Typewriter's Song, which is an odd thing to do. And the 4th stanza goes like this. A start, a thrill, a rattle, and then it pounds out swift and hearty. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of the party. But why? I cannot possibly think. Anyway, 2 marks on the knowledge I've got so far. Well, now I'm going to ask Frank and Dennis to give me their explanations of how these quotations came into being. And for this round only, the marks will go to whichever unlikely explanation receives the longer applause from the audience here in the theatre. So back to Frank Muir and his quotation. Be good, sweet maid, and let who will be clever.
I shall never forget the first time I saw the Grange, which was old Lord Willoughby's seat. He invited me to stay at Boy 13. Balmy days they were, you know, those summer days. In those days, weather was different. Humming of birds, you got in the bees. Sudden sound of thwack across the meadows, thwack of leather upon willow. as a bored guest kicked a tree. For something to do. One day I recall I was walking in the estate. I was looking for a willow tree that hadn't as yet been kicked down by guests, and I happened upon a cottage, a pretty cottage in a clearing. It was called Clover Cottage. I remember it was green. They call now Rising Damp, I believe. And I remember my aunt saying, don't, whatever you do, go near Clover Cottage, because there was a woman there, a girl. Her name was Maud Indigo. Maud Indigo. And she's a dangerous sort of gal, and I don't want you to go near her. She farms there. Well, while I was standing looking at the cottage, I saw her. She'd just finished ploughing. She took the harness off, let it slip to the ground, and she saw me and she said, "Hey, you there. Bain't there be any young blades up at the big house who'd like to talk to I? Because I be bored." I thought, that's her. That's the wicked gal my aunt warned me against. And I ran back as fast as my little feet could carry me back towards the house, because one of the house guests was a young N'-ear-do-well. It was Lord Willoughby's son and heir. It was Sir Hugh Willoughby. He was about 22. Slicked back hair and moustachios, don't you know, very much of a blade. And I said to him, Sir, there's a girl in the clearing who's very bored, and she asked me whether there isn't a nice young man. And he said, well done, young un. He said, take this to her. And he got a bit of paper and he scratched on it, meet me in the hollow behind Clover Cottage at midnight for fun and games. I said, you want me to be a go-between? He said, go on, take it to her and don't breathe a word for anybody or it'll be the worse for you. And I rushed back and carried it to her. Well, 60 years passed, and last week I was in a store in Knightsbridge. I suddenly recognized that bent old figure with white hair. I thought, it's Hugh Willoughby. I went over and said, Sir Hugh, do you remember me? And he said, yes, I do. It's my little go-between. And he told me that he had no job now, just his old age pension. and would I go and see the present owner of the old estate, the Countess of Partridge, and ask whether he could rent Clover Cottage for his declining years? I said, my last journey for you. And I went there, and I saw the old lady, and I said to her, Countess of Partridge, do you remember anybody called Sir Hugh Willoughby? She said, that scoundrel, that swine. Of course I do. I used to know him when I was a girl, before I married the Earl of Partridge. I used to live in a little cottage called Clover Cottage. I said, what? I looked at her closely. I said, you are Maud Indigo. She said, yes, that villain, that swine. I said, I am the old go-between between you two. I said, will you do something for me, just as one last request? She said, what? What can I do for you? And I said, just this. Be good, sweet Maud, and let Hugh Willoughby Clover.
Well, now Denis Norden, and if you remember his quotation was, "Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of the party."
I've often thought that one of the wisest bits of advice ever offered to civilized man is that slogan that's printed on all patent medicine bottles. Keep away from small children. Now, never does this tip become more justified than at a birthday party for 4-year-olds, especially when the birthday girl is your own flesh and blood. There's a tug at your trousers, and it's one of the little girl guests. "Yes, dear? I'm Caroline." "I know, dear. So is everybody." Now, that is literally true. We had 8 Carolines. 5 Rebeccas, 4 Jakes, and a good half-dozen Simons. I learnt a great truth about children's parties. Never serve 8 jugs of orangeade in a house that has only 1 bathroom. You see, what you encounter immediately is the myth that all the English are united by a common language. What happened was, first of all, one of the Simons came up to me. "Mister," he said, "I want to go susu." "You want to what?" I said. But the fattest of the Carolines was plucking at my sleeve. "Yes, dear? Where do I tinkle?" Now, I was beginning to get a bit bewildered, and a rather red-faced Jake came dashing in very fast. "Make whistle here now." Rather urgently, I thought. "Look, Jake," I said, but just at that moment, one of the more soignés of the Rebeccas came in. "I would like to go to the toilet, please." It was then the penny dropped. I turned back to the original Simon. "There," I said to him, "that's what you should have said. I want to go to the toilet." "Not anymore," he said. And that's when I realized that is why there is a generation gap. What kind of a society is it where parents standardize the names of their children but think up 10,000 different ways of saying potty? It's no wonder that the kids grow up resentful. What we must do, what we have to do right away, is set up a royal commission headed by someone preferably of the status of, let's say, Lord Goodman, who will decide on an agreed phrase that all of us can then conform to for this activity. Or, as has been typed so many times, "Now is the time for Lord Goodman to come to the aid of the potty."
Well, ladies and gentlemen, by your vote, Frank Muir just wins the story, but nevertheless, Anne Scott James and Denis Norden win the entire contest, and that brings to an end this edition of My Word.
In My Word, you heard Dilys Powell, Anne Scott James, Frank Muir and Denis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland, who also compiled the questions. The programme was devised by Tony Shryan and Edward J. Mason and presented by the BBC. The BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the programme and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Anne Scott James, Denis Norden, Dilys Powell, and Frank Muir. Round one tries to test their respective vocabularies, and for this Christmas edition, some at least of the words relate to food or drink. 2 marks for correct answers. Anne Scott James, what's the meaning of bohea? B-O-H-E-A.
That comes in Kate Greenaway, I think, a cup of nice bohea. It's a kind of tea.
Do you remember what kind of tea?
China tea, we think.
Good enough. It's black tea of the lowest possible quality, the last crop of the season. It comes from a province in China which was called Wuyi, north of Fujian, if that helps you to identify it geographically. But this is a bit confusing because at the time when Alexander Pope was writing about it in the 18th century, it was then one of the finest rather than the nastiest kinds of tea. 2 marks. Frank Muir, what is degustation?
It's a function.
Yes?
It's a function performed by a bismuth tablet. Taking the wind out. It sounds to me like a French word one sees written up rather frequently in La Belle France.
Yes, it's a French word.
Which is, it's a sort of French equivalent of delicatessen, isn't it? And it probably comes from goût, taste.
Because
it's edibles. Degustation is where you go to have things which are nice to taste.
Absolutely right. 2 marks. It's a tasting, as, for instance, with a wine tasting, and it is a pretty rare 16th century verb, degustate, to taste, from the French. Dilys Powell, what's the meaning of ampulla? Ampulla. Ampulla.
Something rather small, I think.
Yeah, not very big.
It's an ampullet.
Um,
A small egg.
I thought it was like an ampoule, which contains the thing you inject.
Well, there are various ways of injecting.
It's a very small flask or something. Very small. Phial. A
Looking
phial.
like- yes, looking like what?
Looking like what? Well,
how would you
hollow.
How would you pick it up?
Oh, by the handle.
How many?
2.
Ha! 2 marks it is. That's what I was trying to get. It's a small Roman flask or bottle with 2 handles. It was later in ecclesiastical circles a vessel for holding the consecrated oil. In biology, it's the dilated end of a vessel or duct in an animal, and it's very, very much smaller than the Greek amphora, which held something like 6 or 9 gallons. Yes, that's much bigger. Denis Norden, what precisely is or was rot gut?
It's a cheap kind of liquor, generally rather deleterious in character.
I think that'll do, Dennis.
It's that wine that was offered for testing, and the report came back, this horse is unfit for work.
Well, pulling you back to precision, in England, more specifically, it was bad small beer. In the USA, it was normally inferior whiskey. Before we begin round 2, there are 2 quotations for the teams to write down, and I want the 2 women team members to go on studying them, because at the end of the programme I shall ask them where the quotations come from. Anne Scott James and Denis Norden, your quotation is, "A good example is the best sermon." And Dilys, Powell and Frank, yours is, "Stand a little less between me and the sun," S-U-N. And then in the last round of the programme I shall ask Denis and Frank to give me their idea of how these came to be said or written. On our round of inside-out definitions, what I do is to give the definition first, and then I hope members of the team will tell me who, what, or where the definition refers to. 2 marks. Anne Scott James, what is the force which tells us why an apple doesn't go to heaven?
What are you talking about?
What is the force which tells us why an apple
the
doesn't go
force
to
of
heaven?
gravity.
Why?
Well, because apples, by and large, have to fall downwards rather than upwards.
Yeah, there's actually a very another interesting thing about apples. Why is it that if you've got a tree in your garden, your apples fall in the neighbour's garden, but his leaves fall in your garden? That's a force that's never been explained.
That's sheer bad luck, that one.
Have we got a good cure for silver leaf while we're on the subject?
No. No, you're quite right. It's the force of gravity or gravitation. There was
That's
an
a
apple,
wigwam.
a famous apple, which fell on Isaac Newton's head and woke him up to the force that caused it to do so, gravitation. Frank Muir, the place bad plays go when they die.
The place bad girls go is Paris.
Yeah, no. Bad plays.
Well, that's a joke, so written by somebody else.
Yeah.
So presumably this is a joke on a joke.
Yes, it is a joke on a joke, but probably push it back into the 1930s and 40s, makes it easier.
Place bad players go. Not the BBC. No, couldn't be. Couldn't.
No.
Dilys knows.
Hollywood.
No, I don't.
Yes, that's right. The place is Hollywood, according to George G. Nathan, but he was, in fact, as Frank hinted, parodying an earlier saying by Oscar Wilde about where good and bad Americans go when they die. 2 marks. Dilys Powell, the alliance of 2 people, one of whom never remembers birthdays and the other never forgets them. What is it?
Marriage.
Yeah, all right, 2 marks. Marriage, Ogden Nash. Denis Norden, when a guy gets stabbed in the back and instead of bleeding, he sings.
That was Schnozzle Durante. Was originally said that, talking about opera.
Yep, I've got Ed Gardner, but probably Schnozzle Durante came first. I'm not very clear about that one. Anyway, 2 marks.
Predated Duffy's Tavern.
Well, now we look for the odd man out. What I do is to give sets of 4 in which 3 are in some way connected together and 1 isn't. There's some seasonal reference to food and drink again. 2 marks. Anne Scott James, avocado, tangerine, yam, mango.
Yam's a sweet potato.
Yes.
The other 3 are fruits.
That's what I wanted.
Oh, 3 are fruits and 1's a veg.
Yep, 2 marks. Frank Muir, Carrier, Fodor, Mrs. Beaton, Raymond Postgate.
Well, John Le Carrier is the cookery writer who wrote The Pie That Came In From the Cold. Mrs. Beeton is the cookery writer who didn't write First Catch Your Hare. That's 2 cookery writers. The third one is... Who was the third cookery writer?
Raymond Perskate.
Raymond Perskate! So Fodor isn't a cookery writer and is the odd man out.
Robert Carrier, Mrs. Beeton, Raymond Perskate all wrote guides to food, among other things. Fodor is a series of American guidebooks to foreign countries, which of course include some reference to the kind of food you might find there, but are general guides. Dilys Powell, Hippocampus, Hippocras, Hippopotamus, and Eohippus.
Hippocras a drink.
Hippocras is the odd one out.
Why? What is it?
Well, the others are sort of creatures.
Yes.
I know what Hippocras is. Hippocras is a drink. And it was called Hippocras because it was sieved through a kind of medical sieve.
Yes.
Hence the Hippocras, the Hippocratic Oath from doctors.
An exceptional erudition and 3 marks. Hippocras was indeed wine flavoured with spices and probably named after the Greek physician Hippocrates because it was strained through this curious filter called Hippocrates' sleeve, which always struck me as rather unhygienic. The other 3...
Well, he wasn't in it.
The other 3 are all animals. Eohippus is the tiny ancestor of the modern horse. Hippocampus is the seahorse, also very small. Hippopotamus doesn't need describing by me. Denis Norden, Vouvray, Sancerre Sauvignon, Meursault, and Muscadet.
Oh, yeah, this is one of those wine dipping things. One of them is, and the other 3 aren't, either white or sparkling or from a certain hillside in France.
I know where Sancerre comes from. It's a Loire wine.
Yes, that's right.
All right, well, then that's either the exception or the
rule.
or the rule, yeah.
Meursault is a white Burgundy from the Côte d'Or. The other 3 are all from the Loire, Vouvray, Sancerre Sauvignon, and Muscadet.
Very well.
Yeah.
Well, now we have a round of seasonal words and expressions. 2 marks, please. Give the meanings of the following words and how they originated. And Anne Scott James, the Waits, W-A-I-T-S, the Waits.
Well, they mean the carol singers.
Yes.
And the origin thereof, we think, is... something terribly obvious. Like they took so long piping up and getting their pipes in tune and getting their voices going. It's a delaying word. It's to wait.
Yes, street musicians who serenaded the principal parts of the district, usually on Christmas Eve. And at one time it was the duty of these musical watchmen to pipe the watch nightly in the King's Court 4 times from Michaelmas to Shrove Tuesday and 3 times in the summer. Probably they're called waits because the oboe was formerly called a wait. Frank Muir, Hogmanay.
Hogmanay is the high point of Scottish life. It's the last day of the old year.
Yes.
New Year's Eve, south of the border.
And what happens?
Oh, everything happens. There's first footing.
It's a very odd word. You don't know how it came.
Well, it's hug me knee, actually, because amidst all this revelry, if you're a Scots with a kilt and you hug your knees, it stops anybody's tampering with your sporran. Confirmation devoutly to be wished.
Isn't a word for whiskey, is it?
No, that's Oscarboch.
Oscarboch. One and a half. It's the name given in Scotland still to the last day and night of the old year, when first footing is practiced just after midnight. The first foot to enter the house in the new year, they're usually asked rude rhymes and asked for cakes or money. But the origin is an odd one. Hogmanay is probably from the French au guy l'an neuf, which doesn't mean our guy.
It's a long way from the French.
It means to the mistletoe of the new year. It's the first toast that you drank inside the house. Good luck to the mistletoe. Dilys Powell, why are mince pies traditional Christmas fare?
I think they had all the leftovers from the turkey in them, mincemeat.
Yes, before that. Long before turkeys.
4 turkeys. Goose they had. capon they had.
They were made of mincemeat.
Yes,
Made of
that's right.
mincemeat.
Yeah.
They were originally shaped like the manger or crib and were presented to guests to symbolize the Christ child's crib of birth. And they were originally, as Frank quite rightly says, nourishing mutton pies. And then as the rest of Christmas food got richer and richer and richer, they were changed to the present fruit mince. Denis Norden, the boar's head.
It's a traditional dish which used to be eaten at Christmas, but goodness knows now you probably get boar's head fingers or rings, I should think. It comes in rings. I think part of my world ended when spaghetti came in rings. Started off when soup came in envelopes. It comes from the Anglo-Saxon word bursed, which was a druidical festival which was held round about the time of the winter equinox.
Yes, you're quite right.
And
Stop there quickly.
and they ate bursed, or as Professor Neville Cogger will have it, bursed.
Jolly good. Serving a boar's head on a dish at Christmas was said to be derived from Scandinavian mythology because they had a god of peace and plenty who was particularly useful at Yuletide called Freyr, who rode in on a boar, which was called Gullinbursti for that matter, and his festival was at that time of the year when a boar was sacrificed and the head was carried in on a gold or silver dish and crowned in all sorts of ways and with a flourish of trumpets and minstrels and all the rest of it. And there is a famous boar's head carol which was sung before Prince Henry at St. John's, Oxford in 1607. Well, now we come to the last round. 2 marks, and Scott James, going to give me the origin of yours. A good example is the best sermon.
It's a very, very, very dull thought. And I can only think it's an old trad proverb.
It is. 2 marks. It comes in Hayward, I think, in his collection of proverbs.
I was about to say Hayward because it's the only proverb book the one's ever heard of.
16th century. Well, now, Dilys, can you give me the origin of yours? Stand a little less between me and the sun.
Well, that's another of those classical remarks.
Yes.
It was said by Diogenes.
Absolutely right. 2 marks. Well, now I'm going to ask Denis and Frank to come up with their improbable explanations of how these quotations came into being. And for this round only, the marks will go to whichever improbable story gets the longer applause from the audience here in the theatre. So back to Denis Norden and his. A good example is the best sermon.
One of my favourite books is a thick volume entitled The Hypochondriac's Guide to Ill Health. Now, if, like me, you are one of those people who wear a thermometer on your key ring, you'll find it a veritable treasure trove. But while I was leafing through it the other day, trying to pick out which illness to have next, it suddenly occurred to me how out of date so many of the maladies that they offer you are. I mean, things like housemaid's knee, coachman's elbow. They're occupational hazards relating to occupations that hardly exist anymore. And what the world needs now, I thought to myself reading this, is not love, sweet love. It's a list of similar afflictions, but ones that pertain to our contemporary lifestyle. A similar catalogue. I thought surely the modern sort of technological society that we live in must have thrown up these kind of health hazards that are peculiar to our time. And I thought, such as what? In the category of female complaints, which takes so much time in the old-fashioned medical books, what about modern female complaint? Well, I would designate cosmetic astigmatism. That's a form of impaired vision and rapid blinking caused by putting on false eyelashes the wrong way round. On the other hand, a common form of injury peculiar to the male sex nowadays is one you might call trendsetter's dislocation. Now, that's a peculiarly painful form of accident, which occurs sometimes when you bend over to zip up your trousers and you happen to be wearing one of those dangling pendants. You know, the longer I thought about this, about the way we live now, the more of these complaints came to mind. I thought, what about pornographer's squint? Now, I draw no conclusions about any of these ailments, nor do I issue any moral reproofs about them. No. My claim to next year's Nobel Prize for Medicine is based solely on the fact that I am the first man to give samples of these maladies, to give a sample of aches and pains which have never occurred before. And that in itself, I think, should be enough to qualify me, for as the old proverb said, or nearly said, a good ache sample is the best sermon.
I still wish Denis every good health, and go on to Frank Muir. And if you remember, his was Stand a Little Less Between Me and the Sun.
I'm very interested to read in the paper that Claude Monet's painting, The Girl Walking by the River near St. Cloud, has been sold to a Texan who wanted it very much for a drinks tray. And this is, as you know, is a very important painting because it's the first time that Monet actually included a figure in his work. Why did he paint it? Very interesting story. Now, he put the figure in and started painting that picture the evening of the first Impressionist exhibition in Paris in 1874. He and all the other young Impressionists were very, very poor, and they'd taken this hall to put on their pictures. And they were all terribly excited that morning, and they met at the cafe in Montmartre. And they were all looking forward. The meeting was about to open, the exhibition was about to open in about an hour. And old Claude Monet, he said, "It will not work. It will not work. You have gone all wrong, mes amis, all wrong. All you paint is women. Women. Degas, a great fat woman washing the back of her neck over a basin. Flesh in the pan. That is all. Manet, Edouard Manet, déjeuner sur l'herbe, woman sitting there on the bare turf. Don't like that. Renoir, the bather, another girl like a mauve sea cow, sitting on wet turf. They will not like it. I go. You have your exhibition. I go to my little stretch of the Seine near St. Cloud, and I will paint the river and the lights on it. Goodbye, good luck." And he went off. They all got very excited, and Van Gogh said, "I will get beer for us all. Come on, a last toast, landlord, beer." He said, "You have no money." He said, "Surely I can pledge something. I tell you what, landlord, my only ear for the beer." They had one drink, and then this motley gang of poor painters went to their exhibition. And it was a riot. It was a fantastic success. The people of Paris had never seen such voluptuous figures in their nakedness and ordinary surroundings. The Spanish ambassador, he went over to the bather sitting on the turf, and he seemed to be so grateful for it. Émile Zola and his lovely wife, Gorgon, and there was Baudelaire was camping around, absolutely reeking of fleur du mal, and George Sand, swept in like a ship under full sail, escorted by her 2 lovers. She went everywhere like that. There'd be perhaps with a Chopin to starboard and a Liszt to port. Everybody was saying, it is marvellous, and finally every painting was sold, not for 10 or 15 francs, which they hoped, for 100 francs, 150 francs. The Spanish ambassador paid 200 francs for Renoir's The Bather, and he had to take it away with him. He wouldn't be part. He said, "I cannot leave her behind alone." And he went out. Renoir, with the money in his hand, rushed over to his old friend at Saint-Cloud, and there was Claude Monet painting away his river. Nobody anywhere near, no model or anything painting his river with his lovely little splashes. And he said, "Claude," Renoir said, "look, my big fat woman, they've paid me." He said, How much for your women?" He said, "You should paint women." He said, "Never, I will not sell my art." "How much do you get? 10 francs, 12 francs? He said, 200 francs. What is it? 200 francs for un bon pong. And very slowly, he counted the 200 francs. And then he said, Mon ami, un petit commission, s'il vous plaît. Mettez une poulette entre moi et la rivière. Which, very roughly translated, means, stand a little less between me and the Seine.
Your vote, ladies and gentlemen. Frank Muir wins the story, but nevertheless the other team, Anne, Scott, James and Denis, they win the entire contest, and that brings to an end this edition of My Word.
Taking part in My Word were Anne Scott James, Dilys Powell, Denis Norden and Frank Muir. The chairman was Jack Longland. The questions were compiled by Peter Moore, and the programme was produced by Tony Schreier.
You've been listening to My Word from the BBC, heard each week at this time.